Dengue fever has been on the rise, which means that we must take precautions in protecting ourselves from the virus. Dengue fever is simply a viral infection that spreads from the Aedes aegypti species of mosquitoes. What isn't so simple about the virus, though, is the fact that it may cause death if it goes untreated. Protect yourselves by using insect repellent with DEET, wearing long-sleeved, breathable shirts and long pants, strengthening your immune system, and controlling mosquito breeding sites in and around your house or home. Hi there, everyone. I'm Adrian Atkinson. Welcome to another edition of Jamaica Magazine. The lineup we have for you today promises to be an informative one, so please stay with us.
Good day, I'm Theodore Henry, and this is your JIS News for Tuesday, September 26, 2023. Starting October 2, children under the age of 18 years will not be charged a fee or be required to pay for services at the University Hospital of the West Indies, UHWI. Health Minister Dr. Christopher Tufton says the measure is in response to an influx of dengue cases at the Bustamante Hospital for Children. Dr. Tufton says the dominant strain in the dengue outbreak currently being experienced in the country disproportionately affects children 0 to 16 years old.
We have allowed or spoken to the UHWI, University Hospital of the West Indies, to allow persons affected who cannot be accommodated, particularly children, at the Bustamante Hospital for Children to take that overflow. Of course, the Bustamante Hospital for Children is on alert.
Dr. Tufton says the blood bank is also on high alert and will be conducting special blood drives to accommodate extreme cases where additional blood will be needed. Meanwhile, the health minister is urging school administrators to be aware of the symptoms of dengue as well as the procedures to follow when dealing with affected children.
There is a conversation taking place around looking at those institutions where mosquito breeding sites are present, how we eradicate those, working with the parish health team.
Mild cases of dengue may present with symptoms such as fever, headaches, joint and muscle pains. Persons with more severe cases of dengue may exhibit intense abdominal pain, fatigue, persistent vomiting, bleeding from the gum or nose, as well as blood in vomit, urine or stool.
If this happens, then you must seek advice from your doctor. You must either visit the health center, your private practitioner, or the hospital. If your symptoms are severe, then you must go to the emergency room.
Meanwhile, the Ministry of Health and Wellness is reminding persons that the recommended treatment for dengue fever is acetaminophen or paracetamol.
In 2019, our children were affected severely by dengue, and many of them passed. Now, a lot of those deaths was caused by the use of medications such as ibuprofen, diclofenac, and medications called non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs to treat fever. These medications either cause bleeding or worsen bleeding. I'm asking all parents, please consult with your pharmacist. Use only medication like paracetamol or acetaminophen.
The island's Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Jacqueline Bisesa McKenzie, further recommends sponge baths to reduce the fever associated with dengue. Health Minister Dr. Christopher Tufton says science is showing that climate change is contributing to an increase in mosquito-borne diseases and the threat they represent. The outbreak cycle, he says, usually occurs every 5 to 6 years, but data is now showing recurrence within a 3-year period. Dr. Tufton anticipates the dengue outbreak could go up to December. As such, persons are being urged to take personal responsibility in reducing breeding sites of the Aedes aegypti mosquito, which transmits dengue and other mosquito-borne diseases.
So there is a plan. That plan has been activated, but ultimately it's about public awareness and public response. So I want to use the opportunity to appeal to the public to take the necessary precaution to protect yourself and your family members around you by protecting those sites where we have containers. Look into your homes where the vase is on the table or the whatnot. Look at the solid waste, the used tires, the old milk tins, and do what is necessary to avoid the Aedes aegypti mosquito from breeding.
In other news, Minister with responsibility for the environment, Senator Matthew Samuda, says recycling activities will be boosted in the coming months when the island's deposit refund scheme is legislated. Minister Samuda says the island currently recycles 22% of its plastic consumption. With the legislation, that figure is expected to be increased and make recycling a way of life.
You will have to pay a particular amount of money on a plastic bottle, and you get it back when you bring it back. So we'll be assured we're able to collect all the plastic bottles, keep them separate, and significantly increase our recycling in Jamaica.
The minister was addressing Monday's Tourism Awareness Week tree planting exercise at the Excelsior High School in Kingston. The deposit refund scheme legislation aims to increase the percentage of plastic bottles collected for recycling and improve the country's environmental and waste management thrust. Already, there is a private sector-driven voluntary recycling scheme which provides cash refunds to consumers who return plastic bottles after use. The Joint Select Committee of Parliament reviewing the Cybercrimes Act have recommended stronger penalties for offences against children to be included in the Act. That recommendation was among the submissions proffered in the committee's report, which was adopted in Parliament last week.
The committee supports the recommendation that there should be harsher penalties in relation to offences against children, and that there should be a distinction between the penalties for offences committed against children, by children, and adult offenders, and that the term of imprisonment be increased from 15 to 20 years for an adult who commits an act where the victim is a child.
Telecommunications Minister Darrell Vaz said the committee also recommended that the Forgery Act be updated to include an offence to deal with the possession of forged documents. Another recommendation from the review was a provision in the Cybercrimes Act to address the malicious sharing of images from scenes of accident or death.
After careful consideration, the committee noted that Section 9(1) of the Act would address the issue, but the intent to harass, cause harm, or the apprehension of harm would have to be proven. The committee also took note of the Office of Director of Public Prosecution's guidelines for prosecuting cases involving malicious communication on the said section, and observed that if the intent could be proven, the person affected could be pursued in a civil lawsuit.
And finally, persons eligible to become registered electors have 1 week to register for the next voters list. The deadline to apply for the November 30, 2023 list is Friday, September 29. In a release, the Electoral Office of Jamaica EOJ reminded that only registered persons on the voters list can vote in upcoming and future elections, polls and referenda. Individuals who register after September 30 will have to wait to be added to the next list, which will be compiled by May 31, 2024. To register, persons must apply in person at any EOJ constituency office. Applicants are advised to wear only bright or dark-colored clothing, not white or light colors, to have their photograph taken. Following this, a team from the EOJ will visit the applicant's residence to verify the address to complete the application process. The public is being reminded that there is no cost to apply for a voter registration card. To be eligible, applicants must be at least 18 years of age, a Jamaican or Commonwealth citizen ordinarily resident in Jamaica for at least 12 months prior to registration. Individuals who are already registered to vote should not reapply. And that's it for JIS News Today. I'm Theodore Henry. Thanks for watching.
The Joint Select Committee of Parliament considering job descriptions, codes of conduct and performance standards for parliamentarians wants to hear from you. Send your opinions in writing by Tuesday, October 3, 2023 to Clerk to the Houses, Gordon House, 81 Duke Street, Kingston. Or email us at clark@japarliament.gov.jm. Visit the Parliament's website at www.japarliament.gov.jm for details.
Learn how to protect yourself and your home from mosquito-borne diseases, particularly dengue fever, in this next feature.
Dengue fever is a vector-borne disease carried by the Aedes aegypti mosquito. It is caused by the flavivirus and occurs in either a mild or severe form in tropical and subtropical areas of the world. Globally, 50 to 100 million cases of dengue are seen yearly.
Dengue is endemic to Jamaica, meaning that since its introduction in 1977, we have cases that occur every year. The cases of dengue fever, including severe dengue, can occur at any time throughout the year. An outbreak is declared when the number of cases increase above the usual that is expected for that time of the year.
Dengue is transmitted to humans by the bite of the infected female mosquito. Symptoms typically begin 3 to 14 days after someone gets infected with the virus. Symptoms can last from 2 to 7 days.
The incubation period is usually 4 to 10 days, and illness begins abruptly, and there are essentially 3 phases of the illness. First phase is where you have the fever. The second phase that you can go into is a critical phase, and then you have a recovery phase.
Over 70% of persons who contract the disease usually experience mild symptoms. Persons affected by the mild form of the disease may experience fever of 40 degrees Celsius or higher, headache, muscle pain, and bone and joint pain. Some people may also experience nausea, pain behind the eyes, swollen glands, vomiting, sore throat, rash, and diarrhea.
So you can see that it's a range of symptoms that can present, and therefore when you initially present with dengue, it may be seen as different illnesses. It may be seen as gastroenteritis, it may be seen as an upper respiratory tract infection, or it can be seen as dengue fever.
To be on the safe side and put speculations aside, persons who start experiencing symptoms are advised to visit their health facility or doctor for medical advice and treatment. If indeed you have dengue, do not self-medicate with treatments that can worsen your illness or cause bleeding. So be sure to have a discussion about dengue with your doctor. The Health Ministry says doctors who recognize the presence of a fever should also have a high suspicion for dengue and treat with the necessary precautions. For mild cases of dengue, persons may treat themselves at home with specific types of over-the-counter medications, but heed the warning.
Fever and pain to the joints, pain to the muscles, must be treated with only medications that have cetamol, paracetamol, and Panadol. You can also use tepid sponging, fan therapy, and increased fluid to assist with decreasing the fever. Do not use medications that contain aspirin and other non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs such as ibuprofen and diclofenac. You must read your labels carefully. If you are unsure, consult your pharmacist or your doctor before using the medication.
The drugs you should not take while experiencing dengue have been known to cause and/or worsen bleeding and increase the severity of the disease. Besides the mild form of dengue, persons can also experience a more severe form called dengue hemorrhagic fever, which is a rare complication of the illness that can lead to death. Usually the fever that comes with dengue lasts for about 5 days, and it is usually when the fever is going away that persons tend to worsen. Warning signs include persons not eating, experiencing persistent vomiting, lethargy, restlessness, shortness of breath, pain in the abdomen, or tenderness in the abdomen. Persons should also look out for signs of bleeding.
Those signs of bleeding can include bleeding from the gums, bleeding in the urine, it can be bleeding in the stool. Usually though, when you start getting bleeding in the stool, in the urine and stuff, you have reached a severe point.
It is important to note that a case of severe dengue can occur without symptoms of bleeding. Also, in a case of severe dengue, there may be difficulty in maintaining hemodynamics, in which a person's blood pressure tends to drop suddenly and circulation to vital organs is affected.
With dengue, fluid tends to seep from the blood vessels to the outside of the vessels, meaning that there is decreased blood flow to vital organs. And that is why you get the symptoms of lethargy and restlessness and pain in the abdomen. What those signs are signs of decreased perfusion to the brain. It means that enough fluid is not going to the brain because persons are dehydrated. Okay? The dehydration and the signs of dehydration are very important to treat.
Persons are warned to not wait for these signs and instead go to the doctor or hospital early. People with chronic illnesses such as sickle cell are at a greater risk of experiencing severe dengue. These individuals must use precaution when taking their medications.
If you have a chronic illness that you may be taking medications for and you think that there may be some interference with dengue, you must speak to your doctor to decide whether or not you should continue to take these medications.
In order to effectively combat and limit the spread of dengue and other mosquito-transmitted illnesses, persons must eliminate mosquito breeding sites in their surroundings. Breeding sites include old tires, laundry tanks, dish drainers, covered tanks or cisterns, drums and barrels, discarded buckets and containers. Other sources are pet dishes, construction blocks, bottles, discarded tin cans, tree holes and bamboo, bottle pieces on top of walls, old shoes and flower pots. Mosquitoes can also breed in discarded toys, roof guttering, bromeliad plants, garden containers and tools, brick holes and unmaintained wading or swimming pools. Where water is stored for use, the containers must be properly covered and sealed against mosquito entry. The use of mosquito repellents containing DEET and long-sleeved clothing are also recommended for personal protection. For more information, please contact the Ministry of Health, 10 to 16 Grenada Way, Kingston 5. Call them at 876-633-8172, 876-633-7771. Information is on the web at moh.gov.jm and contact can be made by email pr@moh.gov.jm or on social media.
Mosquitoes can spread diseases such as dengue fever. Common symptoms of dengue include fever, severe headache, pain behind the eyes, muscle pain, joint pain, skin rash, nausea, and vomiting. If you feel you have dengue fever, visit your doctor or health center, rest, drink lots of fluids, use only paracetamol for pain. Do not take aspirin or other painkillers. Protect yourself from dengue and other mosquito-borne diseases. A message from the Ministry of Health.
We live in the tropics, which means we are prone to hurricanes. We're still in the season for this natural disaster, which started on June 1 and will end on November 30 this year. Should a hurricane become a threat to Jamaica, here are some things you need to know about emergency shelters which are set up across the island.
The Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management are working closely with the municipal corporations and the various stakeholders that we are in a state of readiness.
When the advisory are given that person should heed the warning, you move to your nearest shelter. We would have done extensive work leading into the hurricane season. The hurricane season is 6 months, as we all know, from 1st of June to the end of November. And so extensive work would have gone in way before June to prepare the country for any eventuality.
We have started our shelter inspections as early as March, right across the parish. The various municipalities has been inspecting shelters, mobilizing resources and continuing our program in terms of training of our volunteer corps.
The section that is provided for families is a new innovation, and Clarendon must be commended. So I'm saying, yes, I am more than satisfied, well pleased and satisfied. The question has been raised about isolations in regards to COVID-19. All our shelters are equipped with isolation areas so that persons, if they come down with COVID, will be relocated to these shelters.
This year, we have what we call our COVID protocol officers, who are specifically trained and in place in relation to ensuring sanitizing, mask wearing, temperature checks at the facilities, and general protocols being observed in the shelter facility.
We have to pay particular more attention to the facilities as it relates to COVID, because we don't want to complicate matters within the shelters with persons who might be affected by COVID. I can only urge Jamaicans to observe the protocols.
Throughout this program, the ADPEM seeks to ensure a constant stream of emergency supplies, inclusive of relief items, emergency response supply items. These readily available response to emergencies and disasters such as flooding and earthquake.
Many schools are used as shelters, and they should leave it when they leave in the same condition that they would have gone into or better. So we take care of the facilities and ensure that we are leaving the schools in proper condition for our children who use it on a regular basis.
In terms of taking care of our school plant, we have had, some experiences, negative experiences over the years, but we know that it is not the general desire of persons to destroy what is here. We just want to remind you, however, that we need our plant to be available for our children after the disaster would have passed. So if you do come, we are, of course, expecting that you are going to treat it as you would treat your own home.
It would be unfortunate if the shelter managers are forced to evict anyone for violating the protocols that is set. And let me be frank with you right now. It's time now we become more responsible. So I am expecting that nobody will attempt to cook in the shelters, because that is not going to happen. This government, since 2016, have made arrangements that once the shelters are occupied, we will provide food supplies for persons within the shelters. So the rules that are laid out are clear, it is written. I am pretty sure that the persons coming to the shelters will abide by these protocols. I have no doubt that they will. But if they break the rules, then the shelter managers have that responsibility to restore law and order.
We continue to keep the public abreast as to where will be the most vulnerable areas for us to activate shelters. And those shelters that are activated will also be published through our social media and the general media channels.
Building reactors is expensive. That is one caveat in other countries having them to begin with. Jamaica was fortunate in that we had a predecessor, Professor Gerald Laylaw, who had contacts both within the government as well as in international agencies who funded the construction of this reactor in 1984, when the reactor was commissioned. We've been fortunate to use it for so many good works that Jamaica has benefited from since and will continue to benefit from in the future.
This nuclear reactor that we're discussing today is the Slowpoke 2 Research Reactor, located at the International Center for Environmental and Nuclear Sciences in Kingston. It is the only one of its kind in the English-speaking Caribbean.
Strange, not many people know that. It's not a power reactor, we don't generate electricity. It's a tiny reactor and compared to what you might have seen in the movies, actually. Our reactor is just 20 kilowatts, so think about it like 20 tea kettles in your house. That's the amount of power that it has. So it's definitely not power and definitely not going to cut your light bill right now. But what we use this reactor to do is research.
This is very important for us Jamaicans, as nuclear techniques have been applied to study a range of topics from health to agriculture and even climate change.
How the reactor works, it's a device that basically generates neutrons. These neutrons are generated through a process called fission. Fission is basically when the atoms split. So every time those atoms split, it's generating heat. We have a thing in the reactor called a control rod. So think of it like a flashlight. If I put that flashlight on my hand and it's on, you're not going to see the light. That light in this case represents free neutrons. As I lift that light, in this case the control rod, then I can see more glow. That's more neutrons available. And the more they interact is the more they split, and it's a controlled reaction that occurs in the reactor. When you think about power reactors, that heat that's generated is what's used to propel steam turbines and create energy that we would use as electricity. But in our case, since we're not using it for energy, what we're using it to do is basically irradiate the sample that you give me. So if you come to me as a client and you're curious, what's in my plant or what's in my soil, I basically expose your soil or plant to these free neutrons and it gets irradiated. Once you give me your sample and I expose it to radiation, it becomes radioactive. Since it's radioactive, it's basically going to start decaying over a period of time. When it decays, it has these unique gamma rays, which we can pick up on our detector right here. Those unique gamma rays there can tell me how much of what is in your sample. If you're curious as to how much arsenic is in your plant or how much arsenic is in your soil and chromium, that's the information that I'll be able to provide. The number may or may not mean much to you. How that relates is to regulatory policies that are set by agencies that are not us, for example, NEPA or even the World Health Organization. They have limits that are set for lead in soil or lead in plants or lead in water. What we can do is do our analysis and provide a result so that you have an idea of what you're working with, whether as someone going into agriculture or you're thinking about exporting. So this entire lab is a part of the whole process. When I get a sample and it's prepared, we package them in these polyethylene vials. That's what we use to send to the reactor. If you think about it like when you go to the banks in the States and you put your money in this tube and you shoot it to the teller, in this case the teller is the reactor. We do the same thing here, but they're much tinier vials.
This nuclear reactor and its value to the research field is part of what is helping to make Jamaica the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business.
Our program has come to an end, but not to worry. Join us again tomorrow, same time, same place for another insightful lineup. You may visit our website, jis.gov.jm, to catch up on this episode and much more. Until then, I'm Adrian Atkinson. Thank you so much for watching.
This has been a production of the Jamaica Information Service, the voice of Jamaica.